So previously we looked at infant toddler programs, and now we're looking at preschool programs. Because I have three daughters of my own. In the last PowerPoint, I don't think I cited that, but the first couple pictures were of my youngest daughter when she was an infant. And then these are my twins who are now 6, but this was when they were 3 and they were just about to start preschool. My introduction is going to be very similar to what it was for the infant and toddler program, and then it'll be the same for kind of school age and FCC in-home programs, just kind of highlighting the costs to the parent and then how many children we have who are using childcare. So it costs parents about $1,000 for an out-of-home ECE program, and then almost $8,000 a year for an in-home program, and that's kind of average childcare costs across California state. And then in California, there's over 1 million children under the age of 6 with working parents or single working mothers who would be in need of childcare. And that's almost 10 million within the United States. So we are serving a very big population. Myself, I kind of worked alternative schedules. My husband worked nights, I worked days, and we either had family helping us during the day for 2 or 3 hours, while I worked at a school district or an early intervention, or we had a nanny helping us during those times. So my twins didn't actually enter an early childhood education program until they were 3 years old. And that's fairly common across the board for many children. So today we're really just going to be looking at planning for children ages kind of 3 to 5. Some who have been in early childhood education programs since infancy, since toddlerhood, some that are entering for the first time. And, I always kind of cite back to those ideas of diversity. So this kind of includes part day programs, full day programs, programs within a school district, Head Starts, and any kind of state-funded program in military as well. So we have a huge variety within our preschool programs, which is good because our children show a wide range of skills and abilities that need to be planned for within the daily running of a program. So our schedule, our curriculum, and our staffing are all kind of built around the idea of being developmentally appropriate and meeting the needs of our preschool age children. So like the previous PowerPoint, we're really looking at this as being developmentally appropriate. We're meeting the needs, interests, and abilities of the children in our program, at age 3 to 5 are really learning and growing at a really rapid rate. In most programs, you're going to have all the different areas: block, art, dramatic play, math and science, reading, writing, print, circle, large group activities. And I only kind of bring this up kind of because of the idea of the creative curriculum books that you probably are all familiar with. If not, you can Google or Amazon them. And we are mostly all going to be familiar with these books. And once again, I kind of want you to look at them through the lens of a director, or any curriculum books that you've had. If you are new to the supervisory world, you probably looked at them through the lens of a teacher, as lesson planning, as challenging behaviors, as special needs inclusion, things like that. So we want to look at them as a director. So how do you then use these resources about these areas in your classroom to teach and inspire your staff to provide better lesson planning throughout the day to meet the needs of the children within your developmentally appropriate practice? So staffing and ratio, once again, we're looking at Title 22 and then Title 5. So for Title 22, which is like a 2-year-old to a 5-year-old, you can have 1 to 12, so that's 1 fully qualified teacher for 12 children, and then 1 to 15, 1 qualified teacher with 1 aide for 15 children, and then for 3 to 5-year-olds, 1 to 18, a fully qualified teacher, and then 1 aide for 18 children. And then within Title V, so preschool, which is they're considering 13 months, 36 months to kindergarten, it would be a 1:8 ratio. And then I also included any after school. We'll be talking about school age later on, but I did want to kind of cite the idea of after school, which is kinder to age 14, and that's a 1 to school after school ratio for Title V. Once again, there's more information on the Palomar Child Development website, and then the Title V website, and then in our course requirements, I've linked that one page about all of our ratios. So I wanted to talk specifically about supervision at toileting and transitioning. This is a policy level decision about supervision, and it's also a staff level decision. And this is where I've seen most people get their licensing regulation violations, and then Class A violations, which is the one that nobody wants, where, you know, the parents need to be notified in writing. So really the idea is that you're planning ahead and then you're training staff. So you're looking objectively at your space and you're identifying changes within the supervision. So like if you're transitioning outside, for example, you need to walk to the playground, identifying how your staff will count before and after and during that walk to the playground to ensure that all children are accounted for. If it's a bathroom that's hard to supervise, when a child uses it, how is the teacher going to position herself so that she can see the classroom and the toileting child? The best way I've kind of seen with this is to come up with policy with staff. They're living the situation. They know where they need to sit typically, and they're also knowing, you know, which children are having a difficult time, let's say walking to the playground, stuff like that. So they'll be able to troubleshoot ideas on supervision, but you're going to write it down and you're going to make it the policy, and then it's going to be signed. That's fairly key within all of these policies, as I would always have everybody sign it to ensure that they had read it, and by signing it, they were saying that they understood it and they were going to implement it. And then I would post it so that your floats or your subs were aware of it. They should also sign it, but so that they were aware, because a toddler room supervision at the toileting level is going to be really different than it is for a preschooler. A preschooler probably needs a little bit less supervision. They're not getting their butts wiped. They're not being watched for potty training, but they still need to be supervised. So if an infant or toddler room substitute who had read that policy and signed it, they might not be aware of it on a daily basis, and so posting it, not where everybody can see it, but where it is somewhat accessible will be helpful. Here's a clip of a really good video. It's up on YouTube, called Supervision, What's the Count? And it's from a university back east. They have different ratios than us, but it really highlights the importance of knowing how many children you have and what parts and times of the day that you should be counting. This would be something that I would probably show staff who was working with mobile and active young children. So I've kind of linked with the daily schedule. Going from infant, toddler to preschool, we are still using a lot of routines. There's toileting, hand washing, eating, and napping, and they still take up a part of our day, but not as much as our infants and toddlers. So we can kind of get away from our routine-based care into like a schedule. And I like schedules because it allows the children to know what's going to happen next. And then also it makes sure that our programs are meeting the need for free play within a variety of centers, outdoor time, and then more structured time of circle time or play activities, things like that. And I've just kind of put a sample daily schedule of a class that's school that's open 6:30 to 6, and all of the things that would be happening throughout the day. So your weekly assignment, there's actually 3 parts. In infant and toddler, we talked about the training module part. And so now we are writing a daily schedule, and this is going to allow for a wide variety of experiences. It can be part day or it can be full day, but it needs to include the routines of eating, and then napping if it's full day. And then it also needs to include how many children are going to be in the room, and then how many teachers or aides will be on duty. So you're going to be citing licensing. Are you doing Title V or Title 22? And then you're also writing a sample daily schedule for your part of your online assignment for this week. So we talked a little bit about the environment when we were talking about some supervision, because it can be difficult in some programs to supervise your toileting area and the rest of your classroom. So when we look at our space planning and our environment, we're looking at kind of two spaces, indoor and outdoor space, and then within those spaces, the flexibility of the environment to meet the needs of the program. So do you have enough space outside for gross motor? Do you have enough space inside for all of the different centers that we talked about earlier in this PowerPoint? And then we also need environments for routine-based care, napping, diapering, if children need diapers, toileting, eating. Those types of things also need to be included in your space planning in your environment. And we're going to talk in the next slide about our outdoor space. Previously, I talked kind of about infants and how sometimes they don't have their own dedicated space. With the exception of family child care, or ECE programs should have a dedicated preschool space. This is an age group that needs to get outside at least an hour in the morning and at least an hour in the afternoon for full day programs, and then for part day programs, at least an hour for the 3 to 4 hours that they are within your program. So I harp on outdoor space because, this whole class is for people who are transitioning from teachers to becoming directors, or who are already working as directors. And you've all probably seen that a lot of teachers sometimes consider outdoor time to be kind of a semi-break time. There's some clumping and some chatting, and less of a focus on the gross motor and large group activities that kind of outdoor play should be based around. So we really want to look at space planning and what our environment looks like, and then supervision outside. Because teachers often do plan to fail for outside, and then challenging behaviors might occur and emerge from bored children. So always on lesson planning, I had a space for outdoor exploration, and I trained staff that, this was where we could make changes to outside, and that I really liked for it to be gross motor activities, sensory activities, really messy art activities that could be sprayed off with a hose. Things like that you really couldn't do inside. This was your time and this was your opportunity to explore those outside. So I did try to put a positive spin on it. But really, at the end of the day, it was to ensure that there was optimal activities outside for the children, so challenging behaviors wouldn't occur, and then also for optimal supervision. So you want to have your staff positioned so that all of the playground is being supervised at once, and then knowing what your low visibility areas are, and then training your staff and changing the environment to help kind of those areas, because you really don't want your staff all clumped together, chatting. Somebody takes a spill and you have to write a really nasty accident report about, a really nasty spill, and let the parents know about this. And when you know that it possibly could have been prevented with teaching staff that was engaged in the outdoor space and in outdoor curriculum planning. So hand washing procedures should be posted for staff and for parents. For staff, you're going to have the classic employees must wash their hands before returning to work in employee bathrooms. And then I think for parents as well, it highlights how important we believe hand washing is. And then in my programs, I always had a preschoolers enter the classroom when they enter in the morning and they wash their hands. Picture-based hand washing procedures for the children posted at eye level, and then periodically we would go over hand washing, how long it is, what you're singing, are you singing happy birthday, that type of stuff. A lot of times people focus on it in infant and toddler classrooms and get a little lax in other classrooms. But diarrhea and vomiting are cut by almost half in an ECE program when proper hand washing procedures are followed. So it's really important that we still wash our hands, staff and children, and it's one of the biggest ways that we can keep our classroom clean and then cut down on cross-contamination because we're still doing family-style dining. I also wanted to link to the YMCA Wellness Program. You get priority placement in your referrals. If you do this, you pass a little program. I did it. A really nice woman came out. She actually gave me some really helpful advice and ways to change classrooms around. And then I got priority placement on their referral list, which is great. They actually have priority referral lists also for children with special needs. So if you are an inclusive program and you've passed some other certifications, you get that referral. And then also for military as well. About 5 years ago when she did this wellness program, she actually did come back. I'm not sure she's still doing this, but she did the kind of classic lesson plan with the kids where she has a kid pretend to sneeze in his hands, put glitter on his hands. He touches everything throughout the classroom, and it just kind of grossly highlights how important it is to wash your hands and how contagious spit and snot can be. So once again, looking at safety, we're all familiar with accident reports, incident reports, safety checklists. But I want to once again put on that director hat, and we're going to look at it as a director or a supervisor looks at it. So I've just kind of put a picture of part of an accident report because this is kind of the stuff that I think is more important to the director. So it's really the devil is in the details when it comes to these accident reports. And I do take these a little bit seriously. In a past program, I actually had, there were some child abuse allegations throughout a custody battle, and actually my accident reports were subpoenaed as part of this ongoing custody dispute. Because there were a variety of accidents or injuries that the child had sustained, and so they kind of went through all of them, what happened with what parent and what happened at the early childhood education program. So these are important documents to me, and I think having a quality accident report and a quality policy for how parents are notified about accidents can save you a lot of heartache in the long run. So when we look at the detail, we're looking at location, what was the child doing, what was our response, and this stuff can be really easy. The location, the playground, what was the child doing, running and she tripped. The caregiver response, hug child and put on Band-Aid, or offered owie ice, something like that. I do put this thing about the name of the caregiver. That's not necessarily something that has to go to the parents. I only kind of used that as an example on this sheet because sometimes I like to know how a team is working, and this is one of the signs that a team might need some team building help if only one person is consistently responding to accidents. So this is not something that you necessarily need to put on your accident report, is the name of the caregiver. I do have the caregivers sign it when they write it out, and then I sign it after I've read it, and then it goes to the parents, and then I would have the parents sign it again. I would make a copy for myself, and I would give the parent the original, or vice versa. And then we also put some additional information about if the parent was contacted, yes or no, and if it was yes, how they were contacted, the parent we talked to, what time, stuff like that. So, a little owie on the playground, unless the parent wants to, you're not going to contact them every time. But if it was a little bit bigger than a scrape on the knee, how are you going to contact that paper? How are you going to contact that parent? And then once again, how do you keep track of them? In my program, we kept a copy, the parents kept a copy, it was signed by everybody, and that was kind of how we did it. I know lots of programs do it a different way. I probably err on the side of caution in a lot of these things. And then I also do incident reports. So it's a little bit different than an accident report, and many programs do this as well. It would be something that I thought needed to be documented if it involved a lot of kids having an accident. Like with one of my school age programs, we did one of those sumo wrestling things, and a bunch of kids got hurt in kind of a jumping sumo thing. So we did an incident report about that, and we never did sumo wrestling again. But things like that happen. Or if there were altercations, if it was something more different than an accident report, you might want to consider having an incident report. If you're doing an incident report, you're most likely communicating with the parent by phone as well, though, too. And then safety checklists, we're going to talk more about this in our family, child care, and school age course, our module, which will be next week. But I did want to talk about, I had daily classroom safety checklists. I had weekly for my administration, my front desk, common areas for staff and places where parents might be, and then my janitors and my kind of safety guys had their monthly checklists as well. And then we'll also talk about disaster preparedness in our health and safety, which is in a couple weeks. But I did just want to touch on this and how important it is because, last week we had those terrible floods and hurricane in Houston. And so just kind of being on everybody's radar, I think, how important disaster preparedness is kind of institution-wise, government-wise. And then fire drills, I always you're supposed to track them and they should be done monthly. And then the fire authority can come and look at this. And then licensing also and other regulatory boards look at this. I had it just posted next to my fire extinguisher and then I would write it down every time that I had a monthly fire drill. I think the best place I ever worked was within a school age program. With an elementary school because they were done regularly for us. But other programs should be doing them regularly as well. So I wanted to link to this video called Introducing Technology to Young Children. It talks about it in the textbook, and I think it's a nice way to introduce the idea of introducing technology to children. What kind of technology do we have in the classroom? What kind of programs do we recommend? What do we recommend to parents? And I really see myself, as I said before, as a facilitator. I know that a lot of programs are really different, and I would love to hear from you guys in our discussion board about this. I finished up college quite a while ago, and so I'm familiar with computers. Obviously, I'm teaching an online class. But as far as incorporating it into the classroom, that's kind of a new field for me. So I kind of called my science and technology area my STEM center in one of my programs because that's kind of a buzzword. Parents kind of like that type of idea. And I think for me, it kind of brought awareness that children are learning science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in the early childhood years. So that's something that they are learning. And I had a little desktop computer and I had some, learning programs that I had picked up free at workshops or had been recommended to me. We didn't have any iPads, but I would love to hear from you guys if you use iPads, programs you use, how you incorporate it into your classroom, how you don't incorporate it into your classroom. And then I also just kind of put this guy up here. His name is the Mediatrician. So it's like a pediatrician, but it's Mediatrician. And it's a really nice online resource for parents and providers. And it's associated with the Center on Media and Child Health, which I believe is with Harvard University. So they have some guidelines on types of programs that you should be using. And it's really interesting, like they talk about duration and cuts of like the film that you watch and what kinds of things are really important for children and what kinds of things you should stay away from. So that's something that I've used when I talk to parents before, but I would love to hear from you guys in our online discussion board. We're going to be talking about technology and we're going to just be talking about communicating with parents. So when we're looking at quality programs, it really encompasses a couple different areas. There's health and safety, then there's routine, and then routines within our supervision, and then training of our staff, and then, like always, really incorporating quality, developmentally appropriate practice into our programs. So for this week, you're actually going to be reading 2 chapters from the textbook, and next week as well, you'll be reading 2 chapters. So you're looking at infant and toddler programs and then preschool age programs. They're very quick reads. It talks about centers. A lot of you, if you have teaching or supervisor experience, it's going to be familiar to you. And then our online assignment, there's actually 3 parts to it. You're going to draw a plan, like an environmental plan or a classroom plan for a preschool or infant toddler program. Then you're going to write a daily schedule with the ratios. And then you're going to write a brief bullet summary of the training module for new staff. And I talked about that in our infant and toddler preschool. So you're not writing the policies and procedures, you're just giving me kind of a bullet module of ways of topics that you would want to train a new staff person on who is new to your program. And then also in our discussion board, we're going to be talking about communicating with families, confidentiality, especially if your arrival and pickup is at the same time. How do you bring up highlights and concerns to parents? It's kind of that a poop sandwich. How do you give a positive, you're concerned, and then another positive? And then also technology, like I talked about on that last slide. A lot of you might be incorporating some amazing technology into your classroom, and I would love to hear from you guys how you do that. And then some other references to save in your director's file as desired. So you would download these PDFs or these documents, and you would save them into your electronic director's file on your computer if you want to. So there's hand washing, there's daily information sheets, diaper changing, cleaning and sanitizing, and then that student success guide, which has the ratios. And that is within your Palomar Child Development Department module. So at the top, there's the course requirements, there's Palomar information, and there's child development information, and that's where that ratio guide is going to be.